This video is to assist you with the 4-2 homework. The first thing I want to point out to you is this multiplication chart. It's very important for this chapter to have this memorized, and if you don't, I recommend finding a chart. Just, Google it and type in multiplication chart, and then just print out one of the images that are available to you. To read this, if you look going from the rows itself, if you look in column 1, you can see that 1 times 1 is 2, and 1 times 2 is 3, 1 times 3 is 3. So the way you can look at it is all the answers for 2 times 1, 2, 3, or 4 would be in this row. So anytime you're working on these problems, and I'm going to explain to you factors, these are your factors. What two numbers multiplied together will give you this answer? So again, you can just look across each row corresponding to the numbers. So 5, these are all the answers. If it's 5 times something, 5 times 1, 5 times 2, 5 times 3. With that in mind, now let me go over to these 4-2 lecture notes. Now, whenever you're factoring, just think of factor. That's two numbers. It's just saying a number that divides into another number evenly with a remainder of 0. Example would be 6 divided by 3 equals 2, because 3 times 2 equals 6. And I'm going to write this all out. So a prime number is anything that's greater than 1 and 1. And the only factors, the two numbers multiplied together, are 1 in itself. Example, 3. You can't break 3 down any other way. Like 6, you can break it down as 2 times 3. But 3, you can only break it down as 3 times 1. 5, you can only break it down as 5 times 1. So these are prime numbers. Everything else is a composite number. So we're going to go into prime factorization. It's written as a product of prime numbers. Remember, product means multiplication. So if you have a number such as 12, we're going to break it down. Now, I know 12, there's two ways. It could be either 3 times 4 or 2 times 6. So these are the things I'm going to start explaining when we start off. So when you see anything that we're breaking it down with that number, with its multiples, this is called using a tree method. So I'm going to show you that first. And you can always pause this video if you want to look back on these notes. But here's an example of using the number 80, and we're going to break it down. And then every time we break it down, we got to collect these numbers, and then we have our final form down here at the bottom. So I'm going to explain all that, and I'll write it out. Now, there's another method that you can use if this method here is too difficult. I'm going to show you how you can use a division method to break that number down. Then I'm going to go into making sure that every time we have a fraction, how do we take it in simplest form using this factorization? So I'm going to show you this approach. And then the goal is to get the same number on the top and bottom, because that then it can divide out to 1. Because remember, any fraction, 2 over 2 equals 1, 6 over 6 equals 1, 100 over 100 equals 1. So I'm going to go into all this where I'm going to show you how to reduce this into simplest form. And I'm even going to show you how to deal with the exponents that have a power. So we're going to go into examples like that. And then we're going to go over to figure out if something's equivalent. If you have two fractions, to determine if they're equivalent, there's two methods you can use. You can either reduce it to simplest form, or we're going to use a cross multiplication method, which you can see here. So the first method would either you can reduce it down to simplify it, or we're going to use this cross multiplication where we're going to multiply this direction and that direction to see if they're equal to each other. So that's the last thing I'm going to show you. So let's go ahead and go over to our homework, and let's get started on that. Oh, and lastly, I wanted to show you how to get into your textbook if you wanted to. So how to get into this, when you're in your homework and on your main menu, if you go below, usually you're going on to the assignment link, but if you go down here to the chapter contents and you click on chapter 4, and then if you go directly into section 4.2, you can see there's video presentations, there's a means of studying, but the e-text right here will take you into your actual textbook for this section. And then once you're in this textbook, you can either go through page by page where you start off reading about what we're going to do in this section, it just gives you definitions. It'll give you pretty much an illustration with written instructions how to get through it step by step. So I know it'll have several here in the pages, and then the final pages, it gives you additional problems that you can work on. You see there's examples, you know, example 7, 8. So as you're scrolling forward, it's going to keep giving you examples. And then at one point, when it's done with the examples, it's going to go into, okay, well, here's some numbers now you can play around with. Here's some additional problems to work through. And I know at the end of the book, the very last so many pages, I know there's solutions. So I'm not sure. I think if you go into the back end of the book, there's somewhere in here that you can get. So maybe that's, I'm not sure. There's somewhere where it has to have the answers to make sure you have them done correctly, but I don't know. But at least that's there. You can go through and you can view the examples at the beginning of the chapters and read up on it more. And then, you know, once you're in your MyLabs Plus, you could always get it correct and then click on similar question and keep trying multiple problems. All right, so let's move over and let's go to your homework and start looking at that. So if I go into my assignment section, and I have a lot of these, you'll be able to see several more examples if you use my homework notes. But going into 4.2, let's go ahead and start with this first. So the first thing I want to show you is, if you look at your set of instructions, it's asking for the prime factorization of the following number, which is 18. And if you notice, my answer is 3 squared times 2. How did I get to that? Well, let me go ahead and show you how we work that out. So I'm just going to change my view here, and then we'll get started on writing some of these out. So let me go to the whiteboard. So again, the goal is prime factorization. So they have given you a number 18. So you got to think about your multiplication table. So if I write it using the tree method, I'll say, okay, well, I know that 9 times 2 equals 18. You could have also used 6 times 3. That would have been acceptable. But I'm just going to go ahead and start with 9 times 2. Now, 2, it's not going to break down any further. The only way that could break down is 2 times 1, which is 2. So that's a prime number. So we got to leave that one alone. So I'm just going to circle it because there's nothing else we can do with it. Now I'm going to use this tree method for the 9. Well, 9 we know we can break down as 3 times 3. Now, if you look, there's nothing else we could break down. 3 is now a prime because there's no other way to break it down as opposed to 3 times 1. So that's a prime number. So everything I have circled now, I'm going to collect it as 3 times 3 times 2. I'm not changing the value of 3. I'm just writing it in a different way. If you were to put this in the calculator, 3 times 3 times 2, it's still going to equal 18. So now what I do is, instead of leaving it in that final form, we're going to go ahead, the mathematicians say, okay, well, if anything's a repeating number, write it as an exponent. So we know that 3 times 3 is the same thing as 3 squared, and then we'll times it by 2. So that's the final answer there. Now, I'm going to show you several more examples, and I only get 15 minutes per recording time for free, so we're already at 9 minutes, so there's going to be a part 2 to this. All right, so let's go ahead and let's try. So this would be the tree method. So let me go ahead and let me show you the other method. So if you're given a number like 165, you can go ahead and use the tree method if you can. But another way of doing it, you always think of these numbers, the easiest way is to use a 2 or use a 3. So if I write 165 and I see that it's an odd number, so by this right here, I'm like, that's an odd number. So let me try the 3 first and see if that works. So what you would do on your calculator, you would just take 165 divided by 3. Let me see if I can bring one up on screen. So you would take 165 divided by 3, and that equals to 55. So you write the 55. Okay, so now I'm going to say, okay, now do I want to use a 3 again? But I'm not, because I can immediately see that 5 times 11 is 55. So I'm going to use my 5. So if I write a 5 here, I know 5 times 11 will give me the answer of 55. And all the numbers 3, 5, and 11 are prime. You can't break that down any further. So the answer to this would be, and I'll just go from highest to lowest, so it would be 11 times 5 times 3. And that will be your final answer right there. That's just another way of expressing 165 using prime factorization. So it will be 11 times 5 times 3. If you enter that into the calculator, you're still going to end up with a value of 165. So let me show you. So 11 times 5 times 3, 165. We didn't change the value. We just expressed it differently. Okay, so how am I doing with time? Let's do one more. So if I have the number 980, and I'm going to use that division method. So I'm going to start with 980, and since it's an even number, I'm going to divide it by 2. So again, you just take your calculator and you take 980 divided by 2, and that equals 490. So I put 490 up here. Now it's even number, so I'm going to use a 2 again. So I'm just going to 490 divided by 2 equals 245. 245. Now I'm saying, I'm like, well, I think of 5, because 5, your answer is either going to be in the form of 50 or 55. So it's either going to end with a 0 or a 5. And I see I have a 5 there. So I could have done that previously, but I'm just going to go ahead and try it anyhow, because I'm no longer on an even number. So I'm going to go ahead and plug in 245 divided by 5, and it's 49. So it does work. If the only time that you can't use that method, if you had something like 246 divided by 5 and you end up with something 0.2, then that wouldn't work. It has to have a remainder of 0. So, but this did work. 245 divided by 5 equals 49. So I'm going to write 49 here. Now this is useful. If you know your multiplication table, you'll know that 7 times 7 equals 49. And if you look, all these are prime numbers. So we're done. So there's 7's a prime number. We can't take this any further. So if we collect these, and you always can put it in your calculator to make sure you have this collected correctly. So I'm just going to write it out from highest to lowest. 7 times 7 times 5 times 2 times 2. Now we rewrite it because we want to collect anything that repeats itself. So 7's repeated twice times 5 times now 2 is repeated twice. And if we were to enter all that into the calculator, you should have the same answer, 7 times 7. Because remember that 7 squared means 7 times 7. Oops, I can't get it. Let me try this way. 7 times 7. I'm sorry, I can't get this to work. But 7 times 7 times 5 times 2 times 2 equals 980. So there you go. So that's one way of checking your answer too, especially when you're on a test. All right, so next I'm going to go into how do we reduce fractions using prime factorization, or to factor out is terminology. So I'm going to move over to part 2 of this video, and I'll start showing you those examples.